1. I'm a 32-year-old male and have a job as an IT engineer at SME Retail Company. The company IT department is just established around 2 years during that time. Previously, HR is the one managing the whole IT matter. In our team, we have 4 people. 1 head of IT, our GM, 1 assistant manager, 1 senior engineer, and myself, the IT engineer. Since I'm new at the company, I was not given proper authority on using any IT systems, like managing the server or firewall. My main function was just to support the user on daily PC issues, meaning the server and network fall to our senior engineer. Unfortunately, even though the senior engineer is a higher rank than me, his literacy, unfortunately, in networking and server administration is very low. Previously, the senior engineer worked in the same company, construction, as the GM. Previous job duties of the senior engineer mainly involve laying and pulling fiber and network cable, which is more grunt work, not the system administrator's job. Myself, I otherwise came from an MSP background and have experience in managing servers and networks. During my time there, at first all is normal, but one day I noticed that my senior engineer did something to our server environment, removing a crucial application for data processing. I tried to let my GM know, but unfortunately, he thinks I'm not a team player since I right away went to him instead of correcting my senior engineer. For your information, I already tried reminding him of the implications of removing the software, but he ignored my warning and continued the removal. Since I am the one that manages to make the server work as normal, I needed to make an RCA on this issue to our director, my boss's boss. I explain in detail what happened and how I resolved the issue. Please bear in mind, due to this incident, it caused our server to not work for more than 3 days. This later made my relationship between the senior engineer and GM very bad. Later, after the incident, I'm called by the GM and reminded to just follow their instructions and never question them, because I simply remoted into the server and didn't follow their instructions, and also did not have teamwork. My probation period is extended for 6 more months. This is where the interesting part happens. One day my senior engineer fucked up big, and caused both of them to get terminated on the spot. What happened is one day our company's server was infected by ransomware. I alerted them early since I first detected the abnormalities in our environment, but none of them responded to my messages. Since they also said I can't remote into the server due to security policy, I just let things go. Please remember, the last time I tried to fix the issue myself, it caused my probation period to be extended, so this time I didn't do anything at all. Since both of them are not from real IT backgrounds, they were really in a bind to resolve the issue. Then after 1 week, they tried everything to make the system work. They gave up and said to the management that the system can't be restored. Actually, the system itself is very easy to install and the database itself is very straightforward. With my background, I always thought to make a backup for every system at least once a week. Since I did not have access to the server, but from the client application, we can reach the database and were able to back it up. So I do a weekly backup from my machine without telling anyone from my team. Our company, due to the incident, incurred high loss of money since the operation couldn't be continued. Our director made a meeting between all management and IT during that time. My GM simply said the data loss is due to ransomware. All of the management team were furious during that time. But suddenly my director asked me if I could fix the issue. My GM simply said I am a new guy and do not have the capabilities to restore the server. My director asked my GM to shut up and let me talk. I explained to him briefly that I might be able to do a reinstallation of the system, but with 1 week of backdated data. This is because I had only done the backup of my own initiative weekly. During that time, I can see my GM's face become red immediately. He questioned why I didn't tell him that I had the data backup. I reminded him that he was the one that told me not to interfere with this issue, and reminded him that I'd need to extend my probation because I remoted without his approval into the server. My director asked me to restore the server. After 4 hours configuring the server, I managed to get it up and running again, and operations managed to run as normal. Due to this incident, my manager tried to get me into trouble. But since I just simply complied with his instructions, and all the communication was done in black and white, which included his instructions to simply ignore the issue and continue my job supporting the user. Instead of me getting into trouble, my GM got fired from his position due to not doing his due diligence and getting proper IT security in place, and not having a backup policy in the company. I'm still working for the company after 6 years, and now have his position as GM. 2. Everyone appreciates saving money at the pump. Gas isn't cheap, but it wasn't quite so bad 20-odd years ago. But still, why pay more than you have to pay? Some folks will wait hours at a Costco, others have a favorite station that they use when they pass by, even if it isn't close to home or work. In fact, some truck stops are known for having great prices and conveniently just off the freeway. As a college student and licensed driver, the wise old man needed a ride to the airport. Now, my dad was pretty particular. He was a fan of rules. Nothing was simple enough that it couldn't be improved by a specific formula of rules and instructions. For example, a reasonably easy 30-minute drive to the airport could definitely benefit from specific instructions, plus a side mission involving its very own specific additional instructions. Because the best stealing gas is just off the freeway at a truck stop along the route. There were also a couple of other younger kids over, kids of friends of my mom who were having a get-together. They thought it would be fun to hang out with the older kid who could drive. They did not plan on a road trip, but as you will see, a road trip they would get. To set a clear example, maybe even a standard or bar that would show me just how easy this airport run would be, the wise old man would drive to the airport, detailing the truck stop where I would be responsible for maximizing value and getting the best deal when I filled up on the way back, with no additional stops or deviations to be allowed on this very clear, very simple mission. So we loaded up from southeast to downtown and hopped on the freeway, and upon nearing the big city, we hopped on the freeway that rings this city in the center of the U.S. state in which this happened. The wise old man made sure to note as we approached the blessed and preferred truck stop, the exit number, the road name, the truck stop name. This was easily remembered because it was all very close to home. In fact, it was a drive I made regularly on my runs to and from the state university in the north of the state in my own car. But this wasn't my car, my gas, my money, or my choice. I would get off at that exit and take that highway back home. Now, mind you, we did not take that highway to the airport because it is slower, much slower. There are stoplights, but I was not to get back on the freeway, the interstate. I was to proceed straight home, using only that road, no other stops, no other routes. The rules and instructions were reviewed as we approached the airport. We got there with enough time before his flight to do a quick pop quiz and make sure I knew all the pertinent details and rules. You got it, the kids are in good hands, have a great flight. But he was quizzing me, he wasn't asking for my suggestions. He wasn't even asking if I had any doubts, concerns, or questions. It really was just as simple as knowing the rules. Now, if it was him or anyone else, the correct answer would have been to save time and fuel by taking the same exact route home. Or, hear me out, to get back on the freeway for about 2 miles and take the next highway, which would also have a ton of stoplights, over 20 miles, and would in fact get us home. And so, back to the blessed and preferred truck stop we headed to maximize our value and get the best deal. Cash was exchanged. Premium unleaded fuel was pumped. Now, rather than saving time or money with an efficient return trip, I did exactly as the wise old man directed. We would take the next 20 miles going stoplight to stoplight down the highway. Just not the right highway. I passed a quiz and new rules, and the rules I would follow. Unfortunately, the very clear rules did not allow for getting back to the town where we lived. However, because we were now 20 miles south, actually southwest, I would have to turn off the highway and make another 15-minute drive east through some very twisty farm country. The rules expressly forbade this. So I pressed on, hoping for the best. That's actually a lie, unless you silently add, hoping for the best road trip, because we are absolutely not heading home. The kids in the back were having a blast, going on a trip with a college kid driving, everyone's laughing. It was a genuinely good time. Though as we nipped into the western edge of the correct county, we all knew we were not going to make it without breaking the rules and deviating from the very clear directions. Everyone in the car could have passed the quiz at the end. As elementary-aged kids of maybe 10, they were very excited to get a vote. Do we follow the rules or do we return? Nobody thought it was worth breaking the rules, so onward we continued. And so we stopped heading toward home altogether. Having taken this highway more than once on the way to visit friends at the state university in the south of the U.S. state hosting this road trip, I knew we would definitely make it there, but I would have to go out of pocket for gas to get us home. As with all good things, this road trip had to come to an end, so at a certain point, roughly calculated by a falling fuel gauge, we turned around, we laughed and continued having a great time. We laughed even harder when we got back to the one crucial step the wise old man, my dad, had left out, turning for the long and somewhat perilous farmland connector to get us back toward where we lived. Were the kids willing co-conspirators in this performative act of malicious compliance? Were they my audience? Or were they to be my downfall? As we get out, the kids were laughing. The moms were happy the kids had fun, but we were asked, "What took you so long?" "Oh, sorry, Dad has specific instructions on how to get home, and we tried following them, but ended up going out of our way." My audience just laughed and said they had fun. Since the car was on empty, my mom topped it off long before my dad returned, so the wise old man had no idea his rules and very clear instructions ended up paying for us to have a real nice road trip, despite his best efforts. My mom has been dead for years, but I've never told my dad. But the wise old man is no longer as weird about rules. 3. So I recently went on a trip to the States. I'm from Latin America, and it's kind of a famous family trip to go to Florida to cities such as Orlando and Miami to buy things cheaper in outlets, retail shops, and thrift shops. Onto the story. My family and I were in a retail shop, one of those amazingly big ones. I picked a lot of things, I cannot lie, after I tried on most of them on the dressing rooms. I took them all outside with me and told the lady at the front of these rooms that I'd be talking and seeing with my mom which things I'd actually buy. She then told me that all the other clothes I wouldn't be using or taking with me, I could return them to the place she was at in that moment, front desk of the dressing rooms, and she would return them to the respective places. Lo and behold, I checked which things I'd be buying and returned to this place. However, the kind lady from before was gone, and instead, there was this other Latina with an effing attitude. I mentioned that she was Latina like me, because I've kind of realized on the trips I've made to the US, through what other Latinos from there have told me, that Latin American people who live there are quite competitive with each other, and don't really help one another out. It's even clearer if you're not a resident and just visiting. They look at you like they're almighty and have achieved the American dream because they somehow got a resident visa. Back to the story. I came back to the dressing rooms with about 10 clothing items, all organized with their hangers and blah blah blah. As I mentioned, this place was one of those humongously big stores, thus I didn't really remember from where I'd taken all the items, and I'd rather take them back to the fitting rooms so these people who actually know where I got them from could return them to their places instead of leaving them anywhere. When I got back there, I mentioned to the new lady what the one from before had told me about returning the clothes there. She gives me a once-over, all while scowling at me, and asks, "Do you know how dressing rooms work?" I was honestly confused because, yeah, I do. Then she proceeded to downsplain, quite condescendingly, how a dressing room worked. She said, "So when you buy clothes and want to know how they fit you, you come to the dressing rooms, you see if things fit you, and if not, then when you're going out, you give them to me and I return them to their place. If not, then those clothes are your responsibility." I was mad. What's the purpose of being rude? I smiled at her and then asked, "Can I try them on then?" Since that's how this place works. The expression on her face was amazing. Of course she couldn't say no, so that I could go inside with my clothes. And I'm back outside in less than 5 seconds. I simply tell her, "I didn't really like anything, guess you'll have to put them back." 4. This story takes place from 2007 to 2014. I went to school for television production. I worked in a TV studio on several TV shows and documentaries, and was so good I later opened up my own video production business. But the thing you need to know about this industry is that the starting cost can be massive when you begin. You can't do the work unless you have the equipment, so at minimum, you need to spend $25,000 on equipment before even opening your doors. And so during the first couple of years when my company was still in the red and paying off the cost of the equipment, I decided I would take on a side job that could provide a consistent livable income. With my previous experience in TV and being an expert at several different types of equipment, it was just the edge I needed to get into a position at an upscale luxury hotel in my city. By upscale I mean it was the luxury hotel, one of the oldest hotels in the Midwest and the fanciest non-chain hotel in the entire state. Think like the Plaza Hotel of the Midwest. Let's call them Fancy Hotel. It was 2007, and I was just starting out as their brand new audiovisual technician. As an AV tech, I literally made all events at the hotel happen. A few hours before your event, I would be the one in the ballroom setting up everything. The lights, sound system, projectors, screens, and even some stage elements. I was the difference between your event looking impressive or your event happening in a bare-bones room. If your event called for it, I would also be the one in the back of the room operating the tech table. This is one of the areas my previous experience in the TV studio came in handy. I was already used to the high-paced experience of operating a live event, so I was right in my element. After the event, I would then have to strike the room and get it ready for the next event. I was good at my job, very good. So good, in fact, that within 6 months of being hired, I became their lead technician, meaning it was my call to make sure every event was set up and ready on time. I managed a team of 3 other techs and made sure every event was ready to go. I can honestly say that I've never missed a deadline on an event, even when turnaround times in a ballroom were measured in minutes rather than hours. I learned in the TV industry that when the event starts at a scheduled time, no matter what, the show must go on. So I always figured out a way to make it happen. A little background on how the Fancy Hotel ran. I had several layers of bosses. Immediately above me, there was a director and a salesperson. The salesperson handled the months of planning, contracts, and billing of clients, and the director was a linchpin that connected all the activities of the hotel to all the activities of the AV department. Together, we were just one branch of a larger AV company that we'll call Alpha AV. Alpha AV is a nationwide company that has locations in hundreds of hotels across the country. My branch of Alpha AV worked for Fancy Hotel, along with having the event guests at the hotel as clients. The hotel itself was also considered a client. Alpha AV was under a contract that granted us residency at the hotel. Fancy Hotel would throw all AV business our way in return for a percentage of the profit, as well as providing all hotel AV needs for a reduced cost. Hotel events would be as simple as a projector and a screen for a weekly staff meeting, or it could be as difficult as a huge company event for the parent company. The hotel is owned by a large corporation. We'll call them Billion-Dollar Corporation, or BDC for short, that owns several upscale luxury hotels all over the country. But the home office for BDC was only 3 blocks away from Fancy Hotel, so Fancy Hotel was the flagship hotel for the entire corporation. The hotel that BDC would hold all its events at. The hotel that was always under the microscope and held to the highest standards. Over the years of working side by side with BDC, I made some pretty big connections. Since I was an AV tech with a video production company, I was able to negotiate that into every profitable situation in which I started to handle the corporation's video production work when needed in connection with a hotel event. Whenever they had a presentation to give that required more than a simple PowerPoint, I made the video. So needless to say, I became very well known among the staff at Fancy Hotel and the staff at BDC. I was also well known among the event staff and executives I worked with at the hotel. I had event planners, executives, politicians, and CEOs that remembered my name, because I was the guy that made their large events happen. They trusted me. I was sometimes the only outsider present in a room when secret meetings were taking place. And I was even vetted by the Secret Service, so that I was the only AV tech in the city with the security clearance to be in the same room as the president. Those years with Alpha AV were some of the best years of my professional career, and I received constant praise and recognition from clients, the hotel, and BDC. But all things must come to an end, and in 2012, Alpha AV's contract was up. BDC had the choice to either renew the contract or go with a different AV company. Enter Beta AV. Over the last year and a half, they've been growing and moving into our territory. It was no secret that a couple of Beta AV's executives had the ear of some of the BDC executives, so it was no surprise when the decision was made that in order to cut costs, Alpha AV was underbid and Beta AV would become the next resident of the hotel. Did I mention this was a national deal? For the last 5 years, Alpha AV had been the AV company at every hotel of BDC nationwide, and now every location was switching to Beta AV. When it came to our hotel, the flagship hotel, there was a stipulation entered into the contract. I had to come with the deal. I knew the clients, and the clients knew me. They trusted me. They knew the work I produced was quality, and it would ease the transition considerably. So there I was, treated like an asset in a multi-million-dollar deal. On one 20-hour day in May of 2012, I moved Alpha AV out of the hotel, clocked out for the last time, and immediately clocked in with my new position as the lead AV tech for Beta AV, and moved all their equipment in. Considerably less and cheaper equipment. The transition started out rocky, to say the least. The clients trusted me, and the hotel trusted me. But I could tell my new company still saw me as a member of a rival AV company, an extra person that they were required to hire. The contradictions started almost immediately. I had been running the storage rooms for 5 years, so I knew where to store the equipment in the most efficient manner possible. But they made sure to correct me and make sure we moved the equipment in the way they wanted it. Over the next 2 months, they quickly learned that I was correct, and the equipment made its way into the proper slots. The AV office also went through some changes as it became off-limits to us technicians. It was to be an office for the director, the salesperson, and for the clients. There was to be no reason for us technicians to have to cross paths with the clients. In the 5 years with Alpha AV and my years at Beta AV, never had a client actually set foot in the AV office. We always came to them. They never came to us, so all this new policy did was take away my desk and anywhere else for my technicians to sit in our downtime between events. Those were just changes that screwed us with technicians. Over the next year, the changes this new AV company made started to affect the clients. A pattern started to emerge which the clients began to pick up on. Clients who had the same event at the hotel, year after year for decades, suddenly noticed a steep rise in cost of everything. And then, when the clients arrived to take a look at the ballroom, it's nowhere near as fancy as in previous years. In short, we were overcharging and under-delivering. I would try to slip our clients some of the equipment I knew they needed, but the new sales guy put a stop to it whenever he caught me. If they didn't pay for it, they didn't get it. A whole year of this occurred, with clients getting bare bones for what they paid for. My reputation held for a little bit, but clients soon realized my hands were tied and I wasn't allowed to give them the exceptional level of service they expected from me. Sales started to slow down, and events started to use outside AV companies more often. After a year of this steady decline, there was a shake-up at the hotel. The AV director took this decline as a sign that it was time for him to retire, and the sales guy moved on to another position. When they left, the new director transferred in from another hotel. He's taking on both positions as a director of sales. Their previous duo may have been bad at the job, but this new guy made them look good by comparison. How do you fix charging too much? By charging even more. How do you talk to your clients? You talk down to them and make sure they know that you know more than they do. I literally had to take an active role in pushing him out of events where he would start to openly argue with event planners. I may not have had official authority over him, but at points where he took things too far with clients, I was not above treating him like a child and banishing him to his office. Over the years, I built up my reputation in the city as the AV tech that everyone wanted to work with, and this guy could undo all my hard work and destroy my reputation in a single interaction. When this new director took over, the writing was on the wall. Beta AV was a sinking ship, and the captain of the flagship hotel was drunk with power and actively aiming for the iceberg. I was still friends with many of the executives at BDC, so I had a sentimental connection to try to stick with the hotel and rescue it from the downward spiral. I had to figure out a way to retain the clients. That's very difficult to do with the way the new director was crippling our reputation. Beta AV was corrupt, all the way down to the top with policies that valued money and power over giving our clients what they needed for their events. At our lowest point, we had staple events that were held consistently at our hotel for decades suddenly switching to other hotels. Do you have any idea how much attention it attracts in a billion-dollar corporation when your AV company is responsible for losing the hotel millions of dollars in events? The decline was getting bad, and the final straw came when the deadline affected the hours. We 4 technicians were lucky to get 10 hours of work a week. Clients at the hotel just weren't going with us anymore, and so there were not enough hours to go around. An AV tech doesn't work at a normal set time. They work only when there's an event to work, so if there's no work, there's no hours, and if there's no hours, then there is no pay. As an AV technician, you need to be ready to go whenever an event is scheduled, so having a supplementary part-time job to fill in the gaps was impossible. We had it. I started to orchestrate a little operation in our massive amount of free time. We all started looking for new jobs, and by us all, I don't just mean the 4 technicians at Fancy Hotel. A similar decline was happening at all the other Beta AV hotels in our area, and so I convinced every technician in the area to start job searching if they weren't already doing so. As luck would have it, our job searches were all receiving some very promising results at roughly the same time, so a synchronized event was possible. Now, nothing can be proven I had anything to do with it, but a friend of mine at Alpha AV, my old director, who was now promoted into an executive position, may or may not have been given a sufficient heads up on what was about to happen. A hint or two may have also made its way, somehow, to a couple of friends I still had at BDC. BDC was getting really pissed off at Beta AV, because they were locked into the same 5-year contract and had no choice but to endure the decline until the contract was up, unless something significant happened to break that contract. Suddenly, within the same week, every AV tech in the region put in their 2 weeks' notice at the same time. This event happened seemingly coordinated right before a large event at Fancy Hotel for BDC. As I said before, Fancy Hotel was the flagship hotel where BDC had all their corporate events. And now the only one left to set up and run their largest event was the lone incompetent Beta AV director. This problem created a massive ripple effect through Beta AV. The biggest yearly event for their biggest client at the flagship hotel was in jeopardy, and they did not have the manpower to deliver what they promised. They were in breach of the contract, but lucky, Alpha AV somehow heard about all these problems coming up and was able to swoop in and provide the most impressive AV setup BDC ever had at their event. This series of events really impacted Beta AV's worth as a company, and Alpha AV was glad to step in and make Beta AV an offer. Alpha ended up absorbing Beta. All equipment and personnel became part of Alpha AV. They also absorbed the existing contract, which BDC was happy to allow them to do. Alpha AV moved back into every BDC hotel nationwide. Events returned to the hotel upon hearing the news, and the reputation was restored. My plan went exactly as well as I hoped it would. The mass quitting I organized was the final nail in the coffin to take down a multi-million-dollar AV company. Alpha was able to expand back to the size they were before this, and is still at all of BDC's hotels to this day. BDC was hemorrhaging money due to beta AV, and they were quite relieved to be rid of them. Unfortunately, the story never really had a happy ending for me. As I mentioned, I held on to the position for far too long. I should have gotten out 2 years earlier than I did, and in those 2 years of minimal hours for minimal pay, I ended up in a financial black hole that I'd just finished digging myself out of last year. My car was repossessed, my condo was foreclosed, and my business was forced to close its doors as I had to sell all my equipment just to get by. From that point on, I was forced to give up on following my dreams and follow the money instead. To get positions that paid big rather than positions that allowed me to do the kind of work I love to do. Beta AV took everything from me, but I can proudly say that I was the one tech responsible for taking out an entire company. 5. Tiny bit of pertinent information. In 2014, I had a C-section to bring my son into the world. I was let go from my previous job because they didn't want the liability if something happened to a pregnant woman on the job. I was rehired by the fast food company where I held my very first job, which is not McDonald's. It's a bit higher priced than that, where you could get fried chicken, a hot dog, and a double cheeseburger at the same time. There will be no mention of my child's father, because he wasn't there for us. I lived with my eldest sister, who was more like a mom to me, which is why she's mentioned in this story. She was the person I had with me when I had my C-section. She has been the one there for my son every moment in his life. My doctor said that I was going back to work before his recommended 4 to 6 weeks of healing time and rest, that I had to be on light duty, and that I was not to lift more than the weight of my son, which was 6 pounds. This story. I was rehired by a fast food company that was always extremely busy at each major point in the city. Lunch made over $800 between noon and 1 p.m., and dinner made over $700 from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Of note, the only reason I was rehired was because the hiring manager loved me to pieces. When I left the first time, she told me I always had a job with her because she loved my work ethic. She said that I was the best worker she'd had in years. Nobody ever picked up extra shifts as quickly as I did. Nobody cared to learn as fast as I did. So, since I had previous experience, they wanted me to work lunch rush, but I begged them to let me work dinner. Dinner would allow me to spend quality time with my newborn, and my sister, who I lived with, would be home from her job to take care of my son while I worked. Now, I started a month after my C-section, right? Wrong. I started 2.5 weeks later. If I didn't, I couldn't be hired. I had actually gone back to my doctor and asked his office to write a full letter explaining my light duty requirements, and took it with me my first day back. I walk into the manager's office, expecting to see a hiring manager, or at least a manager I recognized. Nope. Enter a stupid manager who had worked as an hourly employee at another location, and thought she knew better than everyone. I handed stupid manager my doctor's note. She looked at it like she was holding a dirty baby diaper. I asked her to make sure hiring manager sees it, and she doesn't respond. I shrug it off and walk to the back, where the break room was. I saw that all of my co-workers were the same from last time I'd worked there, and they all crowded around me to see baby photos. I was crying the entire time because it felt like a homecoming. It felt like I was finally surrounded by a support system, until stupid manager screamed that we needed to get to work when there wasn't even a customer. We all scattered like flies and made ourselves look busy. I'd keep my phone in my pocket before clocking in, and I periodically checked it, always between customers, to make sure nothing had happened to my son while I was gone. I would think most, maybe not all, managers would have understood that I hadn't been texting, just quickly checking for new notifications. But not stupid manager, she hated it. She'd been sitting in the office checking cameras, and I suppose I'd been checking my phone one too many times. Yay, postpartum depression and anxiety. Stupid manager came flying around the corner at light speed and stared daggers at me. Hazel, what the fuck do you think you're doing? You cannot be on the phone while you're clocked in. You should know this already. Now, I'd never been one to deal with being yelled at, so I just said I was sorry. Some of my coworkers stood up for me, which again made me cry. Stupid manager apparently hated crying too. She turned to me, shooting the same daggers into my soul. What the fuck are you crying about now? Thankfully, a customer walked in, so she just stormed off. I saw red. Within the hour, I watched her start to get ready to leave her shift, which I thought was a blessing. Of course it wasn't. Enter Lazy Manager, who I'd had issues with the last time I'd worked there. Not that I said anything, she just never worked. She sat in the office, staring at the cameras, eating food from the line, which the company said is illegal. You don't get free food, you get a discount on food. Did she ever pay for it? Not once. She wrote it off as part of the end-of-the-day throwaway food. I can't remember what it's actually called on the end-of-the-day report. Lazy Manager saw me, her face fell. "Oh, hey Hazel," she said with disdain. I put on the sweetest smile and attempted to make small talk with the stupid manager, but they made a major mistake. They left the door cracked, and wouldn't you know it, I worked on the side of the lines closest to the door, where I could hear everything. This is how it went. "I thought hiring manager told her no." "I guess not. She's been on the phone all day." "Of course she has. She's one of the worst employees we've ever had. Ugh. I'll call hiring manager and figure this out. I've never disliked someone like I dislike her. She seems pretty lazy. Oh, here's her pitiful doctor's note." "We'll see how that works. It's not like we've never had kids before." Now that fully pissed me off, but I bit my tongue. I waited for what I knew was coming. I knew exactly what I was going to do because I was just plain sick of being bad-mouthed by others. Stupid manager leaves and Lazy Manager calls me into the office. I was in the middle of making an order, but she is the manager after all. I left that poor person's order sitting right on the line and walked to the office. "Yes, Lazy Manager." She doesn't even look up for her computer. "Hazel, what's this doctor's note for?" I just take my phone out of my pocket and try to show her pictures of my son. Oh, you had a kid?" In a tone that implied nobody would want to be with me or something. I smile sweetly and nod, a plan working itself out in my head. Fast forward 4 days, Lazy Manager hasn't been helping us close the store at all, and I've been getting home after 2 a.m. every day, from a place that closes at 10 on weekdays, 11 on weekends. I'm done. My sister can't keep taking care of my child like this, and it's completely unfair. Lazy Manager is working again, and we're really busy. I go to put fries in the fryer because our fry cook is busy making chicken tenders. I open the little freezer beside the fryers and it's empty, which I knew it would be because I never saw anyone put a new box in. That sucks. "Hey, we're out of fries here," I yell, no response. "Hey co-workers, fry cook is busy and we need fries out here." Nothing. Odd. Oh well. "Hey Lazy Manager, we need fries out here." Lazy Manager opens the office door. "Get them yourself, Hazel." I walk over to the office. "Lazy Manager? I can't. My doctor said I can't lift more than 6 pounds. Lazy Manager rolls her eyes and looks dead at me. "Look, go get the damn fries out of the freezer now. 2 boxes. I don't care about this doctor's note shit. Do it. And stay the hell off your phone." And there it was. My opportunity for malicious compliance. I walk to the freezer and look at the box of French fries. I really shouldn't. This could be detrimental to my health, according to my doctor. But Lazy Manager said so. So I noticed that morning that a couple of my stitches hadn't started dissolving yet. So I'd already called and scheduled an appointment, about 2 weeks early. This was all lining up perfectly. I grabbed that fry box on the bottom shelf and shifted it where I could read its weight. I wasn't supposed to be on my phone, but she obviously couldn't see me in the freezer. I snapped a picture of the box. I sent it to my sister with the message, "Manager told me I had no choice but to do this myself. Doesn't believe my doctor's note at all. Can't respond, she won't let me use my phone anymore either." I made sure the message was sent and then switched my phone off. Grabbed that fry box and lifted it, and carried it to the little freezer 20 feet away. I'll say one thing for adrenaline, it definitely works to numb pain until it wears off. I felt a wetness in my pants, and excused myself to the break room. Not the bathroom. That was too private for this. I turned where the cameras couldn't see me. I looked at my pants. Blood. I was bleeding, but from where? Oh, that's right, the stitches that hadn't started healing yet. But there was this other pain I'd never experienced. I walked to Lazy Manager with a napkin covered in blood. Thankfully, the line wasn't anywhere near the office. I would never contaminate someone's food. Because, of course, I tried to stop the bleeding. I was immediately sent home to my sister, who was in severe panic over the message. I called my doctor's office with 10 minutes to spare and explained the situation, and was scheduled for the following day, and told to go to the hospital if the bleeding continued. My sister and I bandaged me up, to the best of our ability, and I waited for my appointment. When my doctor found out why I still picked up that fry box, he sounded more like a concerned father figure when he said, "I'll handle it." But I assured him I had it myself. All I needed from him was a doctor's note. You see, I found out that hiring manager, who was also the store manager, who was lined up to become district manager, had come back from vacation. She was actually scheduled for the following day, and I was supposed to work. I waddled into that store, in uniform, doctor's note clutched in one hand, the other grabbing every solid surface it could to absorb some of the shock of movement. She took one look at me and guided me to a chair in the break room. Concern written all over her face. "Hazel, what happened?" So I told her everything. She asked me if I ever gave either manager a doctor's note, and I said I had. She couldn't find it, but she didn't need to. What lazy manager and stupid manager didn't know was that my sister had a printer that could scan documents, and we had a weird feeling that we would need a copy of the first doctor's note. So not only did I have a new note clutched in my hand, but stapled to it was a copy of the original note. That told the managers that I was supposed to be on light duty, because if I ripped a stitch, it would lengthen my healing process. The new note explained that since I was not given light duty, I not only ripped a stitch, but pulled a few muscles in my lower body. When hiring manager read both notes, she was furious. She checked the schedule, and when she saw neither of the other managers were working, she called them both in for a meeting. She asked me if I would stay for said meeting and that I could sit in her office in her comfy desk chair while we waited. I took that seat and waited for the show. 30 minutes later, hiring manager was giving them an earful, telling them they had no right to disregard doctor's orders, and that they should never have told me to stop being on my phone. Turns out hiring manager had worked for this establishment when she'd had her youngest child. So she knew the anxiety of being away from a newborn for too long. I watched stupid manager get fired on the spot, but not lazy manager. Lazy manager was demoted to line cook, because hiring manager told her she needed to relearn some humility. She worked as a line cook at another store for about a month, and then was fired for stealing food. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge's Ice Cream, episode 187. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, if you could please boop the like button, share the video around with friends and family members, and your pets if they have access to the internet. Okay, let's see. I don't think I think the next shout out is November, I believe. If you do have a birthday shout out or anything like that you'd want me to do, just pop it along to kingofthecities@gmail.com. You can find that in the description. Trying to stop myself saying it twice always. It's a habit I've developed. Okie doke, let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... Okay, here we go. Chips, or fries, or whatever you want to call them. What is your favorite way of doing them? Personally, I like them just the kind of traditional straight-cut fries. But if I'm feeling fancy, like if I'm having gravy or something with it, I'll have them crinkle-cut. Because, I am a fancy man, of course. Let me know what you think, what your thoughts, what your favorites are in a comment below. Maybe you have some wacky ideas I haven't tried yet. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. Got a big project ahead of me this week. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.